goodness! You're a daughter-in-law and part of our family now.
My mother-in-law Susan declared in a restaurant on our vacation.
I told you this is a family trip. Of course there's no seat for you. Did you really think you were a par family? You have such thick skin. Don't you consider yourself a part hag? You bring shame. You can't even be a servant.
I was the one who organized this. What? While she was just blabbing about wanting to be a model, I could help but think that she had no idea what it really meant. And I was below a servant? Whatever. I don't want to join you anyway. I stood up from my seat. I was very much looking forward to, and I never imagined it would turn out this way. But then, my mother-in-law, who was supposed to enjoy the trip, ended up crying instead. She was about to get bitten by karma in a foreign country. My name is Kathy. I'm an ordinary UC wife. My husband, Mike, and I dated in high school. 5 years have passed since we graduated from college. 9 years, including our university years. When you are with someone for that start, seeing the faults of the other. It wasn't like we were going through a patch, but we definitely lost our passion for each other. At the beginning of our relationship, Mike always tried to be courteous. After the marriage, he considered each woman's jobs. He repeated shower, dinner, and sleep on weekdays after returning from work. He lounged around, playing games on weekends. I had a job as well, so I wanted him more helpful. We often had arguments over the beginning of our marriage. After a while, I had given up. I'd even come to believe that it was efficient to have poor help. I suppose all the couples were more like us. The world may have been doing its best to promote gender equality, but it seems that there is still a long way to go. But if you look at it on a family level, it's not that bad. I doubted that such a thing would permeate decades to come. Anyway, Mike's laziness was only a problem. There was a much bigger issue. Susan, my mother-in-law, she didn't live with us, but often visited us at home. If she meant to spend quality time, it had been appreciated. But not even once she tried. She came for only one reason, to ask me to do some bothersome tasks for her. For example, government-related procedures, arranging trips that I wasn't going to take, an invitation to a thorough cleaning of her house. I had to clean her bathroom kit, so on. I wasn't there to help, but was made everything by myself. In addition to this, I signed up for her phone and internet provider and issued a credit card in my name. Other than that, I was used as her. As a nurse, she cared for her late mother, who had Alzheimer's disease. Fortunately, I wasn't bothered by it for hours, but she didn't hesitate to interrupt time with some sort of request. Mike once told me that she was from an affluent family. When she was small, her family's business boomed, and they lived on a large farm. She had a nanny who took care of all her needs. And then the business faltered with a change of trends. After the downsizing of the business, the family lived an ordinary life, but she reportedly kept a selfish, lonely childhood. It didn't really matter how she became herself. Mike should have stood on his feet and stopped harassing me, but he had never shown any signs of it. Maybe it was my fault for letting her be, just to keep peace in the family. In any case, I was not a servant. It would have been better if I had received even a single word of gratitude, but I only got that in the beginning. She's gotten used to ordering me a snap of the fingers. She was always right, and even complained if something didn't go her way. It's got nothing to do with me, whether she likes the weather on her trip. She also had a stingy side and never initiated to pay her credit card and phone bills unless I asked her. I didn't see her every day, so with my life, I sometimes put off urging her and eventually forgot about it. I couldn't tell you how much money sponsored her. I used to twist my brain to make her stop asking me without her. Despite my feelings, Susan, as usual, for a favor one day.
Hey, Carrie, I want to go on an international family trip. Please organize it.
As soon as I answered the phone, with her request, she gave me the details as follows. The destination was Barcelona. The length of the trip was 1 week with a group of 5 people. Flights must be booked in business, and a specific restaurant must be recommended. Other than that, she said, everything was left up to me. How self-serving. I didn't even know if I was able to week off from my work. Even if I did, what about Mike?
It's a bit last minute. I don't know if Mike and I can get from work.
To which she replied with totally comments.
Why should you get approval for a trip from your company? Mike's okay with it anyway. You should prioritize your family job in the first place. I pity your sensibility.
She hung up on me. What an imposition. It was the biggest hassle ever if I didn't follow through on the PP. I shuddered to think how she would in the future. So far, her bullying had been done insidiously in the form of requests, but I wondered if it would become blatant. I had no choice but to make travel arrangements, no matter how much I was annoyed. And for once, it wasn't all bad. I was actually looking forward to Beitou. It was the first time for me to go vacation. How could I not be excited? I then asked my boss if I could take time off. Although he was reluctant, he gave, because it was an off-peak season. 10 most popular tourist attractions in India. Susan wanted to go to Paris, so we booked our flights, hotel, and restaurant reservations, was confident that she would not. And then the day of our trip arrived. There was Susan, her husband, John, sister, Anne, Mike, and me, the 5-1. I've spoken to Anne a bit before, but in terms of relationship value, it's almost as if we've never met before. Nevertheless, I was made to carry Anne's luggage under Susan's direction, and I struggled to keep up with the pace. My hands were full, and I couldn't even wipe the sweat from my forehead due to the hard labor. I couldn't resist calling out to Milt.
Hey, help me out here. Take your mom or auntess luggage.
He gave me a displeased expression, but held out his hands to me, just when I was about to pass one of luggage to him. Susan called out to Mike from ahead.
Mike, don't you take that. This is a family trip, which means have to do any work. You don't need to help her. You should give yours to her instead.
It sounded like I wasn't a family mate. I glanced at John and Anne, who quick away. They probably felt bad for me, but didn't want to intervene and upset Susan. As for Mike, he happily asked,
Really? You'll take my suitcase?
Do I look like I'm capable?
I raised my voice, which attracted of strangers around us. Susan remarked, "How embarrassing," and laughed. Feeling ashamed, I kept my face down and carried the luggage. In a short while, I was freed from being a porter after the check-in. Our flight class was business class on a Sushi Superjet 100. It was a 121-seat configuration, and each seat looked quite comfortable. Then, all of a sudden, I became concerned about the cost of the trip, hoping they would pay for the parts. It was way too late to worry about point. So I discarded the thought. The sitting order was Susan and Anne and John. I'm not sure if I should be doing this or not, but here goes nothing. I'm looking for someone to talk to about anything and everything. If you want to chat, feel free to message me back. It was inevitable for an odd number, but there was no consultation, as of course, I was alone. Although I was at ease on the plane, having Susan ask me to do something. Mike fell asleep as soon as he sat, did not seem to care about me. So I had a lonely 10 hours flight to Barcelona with hardly anyone to talk to. And then we safely arrived at LP Airport. When I got off the plane, my mood was lifted by the unfamiliarity of the air in a foreign place, and I forgot all about my lonely flight. Such excitement was short-lived as we loaded our luggage, and once again, I had to carry the Susan and Anne. I kept calm and endured in silence. It was better than fighting on our and having the worst trip ever. With such a thought on my mind, we arrived at the restaurant. I couldn't figure out why we didn't luggage at the hotel first and then headed out. By all accounts, it was an easy task. Anyway, I entered the restaurant, thinking I would be released from the job for a while. Then I saw Susan waving her hand to. I followed her gaze and saw a man, also about the same age as her, waving back. I had no idea who he was and wondered if he was a local. He was sitting at the table I had, unaware of my confusion. Susan walked with him.
How have you been, Tom? It's been time.
Tom? I had heard the name before. I went up to him and introduced myself.
I'm Kathy, wife of Mike. Nice meet.
When we exchanged a kiss on the cheek, she looked a little puzzled. Then he turned to me with a friendly smile and introduced himself as Tom, Susan's brother.
I've been living here for a long We've never met before. I might have made you feel uncomfortable showing up suddenly, but we're family now, so don't be shy.
It seemed like he was a kind person, Susan. That said, there was one problem. If Tom was joining us, the number of reservations should have changed. Susan was so careless as to not let ahead of time.
Susan, if you knew Tom was joining, should told me in advance. I don't think there's a problem to seat here, but I don't know about the other places.
She looked puzzled for a moment.
Why do you need to change the number?
She innocently asked. I didn't think I said something strange. I worried that she was showing a sin dementia, because there are you, John, Tom, Mike, and me, the six of us. Before I could say anything else, Susan made a face that said, "Got it."
You see, we don't need to change them. We got enough seats. I told you this family trip. Of course, there's no seat for you. Did you really think you were a part of my family? Don't you consider yourself part of HAG? You bring us shame. You're just a guide. You can't even be a servant.
What? Did she just say I wasn't her family? I had done everything she asked me. Even though this trip was arranged, I was still seen as less than a soldier. Moreover, Mike seemed to not care, even though his wife was degraded in the eyes of her husband.
Hey, Mike, can you back me up? We are married, but are we not a family?
He frowned as though he wasn't involved in this.
Of course, you and I are a family, but the relationship between you and your is not really that simple. And I'm told that you are just a guest on this trip. I thought you knew and came along.
Are you joking me?
He was stunned by my enraged shout. Don't get me involved, he muttered. Other diners around us stared at me. The passengers in the airport did. But I wasn't ashamed this time. I was more hurt to be mistreated to such an extent. Susan opened her mouth. I wasn't bothered that I was struggling to hold back tears.
Now that, get to your duty. Your job is to find a taxi and take luggage to the hotel. And then come get us around the table to finish our meal. You can do anything you want in Betty.
She acted indifferently as usual and told me as if it were right and I should do so. I was beyond outraged. I glared at Susan, who treated me like a slave, and Mike, John, and Anne, who couldn't think for themselves and neither agreed nor denied it.
I'm leaving. I don't care about you guys. You have Tom who lives here, so you without me.
I decided to walk away from them at point. Then Susan yelled at my back.
Wait a minute. What about our luggage? At least take them to the hotel. Why do you think I let you come along?
I ignored her and grabbed a taxi to the airport. I booked a return flight on the way. While I was waiting for my flight, I cried from the devastation and despair that Mike, of all people, didn't see my family member. I might have made other passengers uneasy, but my heart was so torn to shreds I couldn't care less. Then my phone started ringing. I wasn't in no mood to talk to anyone, so I didn't check who was calling. But the phone didn't stop ringing for time. When I finally picked up, it was Mike. I thought maybe he wanted to apologize. No, it couldn't have been.
Hey, hon, can you come back ASAP? Tom got upset with my mom and left, and we got kicked out of the restaurant. We don't know what to do now. Family is supposed to help each other, right? So please.
Apparently, Tom was a decent man, as I expected him to be. I asked him to elaborate. Tom didn't like Susan and Mike's attitude towards me.
I'm disgusted. I don't want to spend any more time with you people.
He yelled at them and left the rest. In addition, the waiter kicked them out because they were being a nuisance and creating a scene. They were at a loss as to what to do. Now, how did we ever get from the restaurant to the apartment? That was because I interacted with Spanish. I had never taken a vacation overseas, but I often had business trips to Spanish-speaking countries. Therefore, I learned conversational level through study and experience. When things went rough, they wanted family member. My sorrow and despair evaporated in. Karma caught up with them. I reluctantly decided to tell him the location of the hotel in Spanish.
The name of the hotel is Abzi, located 20 minutes from the restaurant by taxi.
What? What are you saying? I don't understand. Speak English.
I'm telling you nicely. It's your fault that you guys didn't do any prep work in the first place. You knew what was coming. You guys said I wasn't a family member, so I don't care what happens to you. You're not my family anyway.
While I was speaking, Mike hysterically screamed nonsense at me. Then Susan took over the phone.
Kathy, Mike is trying hard, but why not helping him? A wife is supposed to be devoted to her husband. Come back! Fulfill your duty, you useless hag.
She was out of her head. Even though we spoke the same language, conversation wasn't happening. I knew it well, and it was time for my boarding, so I wasn't going to waste any time on her.
Get lost,
I said in Spanish and hung up on her. Then, I immediately started the process on her cell phone and credit card. A sequel to the story. Susan and company had wandered around in Barcelona until they met a kind English speaker who helped them reschedule their flight. But during that time, they were troubled by vicious rip-offs and pickpocketing. Because of that, the cash they had with them was almost gone. I was so glad I had canceled Susan's card. I left my wedding ring and a contact of my divorce lawyer in the house I shared with Mike. I searched for a seasoned divorce as soon as I returned. I was determined to fight with Mike, but he easily agreed to the term. He not only lost a lot of money during his trip, but he had resigned from his job, so he had no financial means to hire for himself. When Susan approached him about the
You can find a job once you're back. Even if you can't, you still have Kathy. And stay-at-home husband. A family trip is more important.
He had been talked into it. Unbelievably moronic, right? Anyway, I quickly became a free woman to this. Mike lost most of his assets due to alimony and property division, and he's now working like a horse. Susan heavily relied on me for various procedures. So she has no clue what to do with. She fell behind on or failed to pay rent and taxes. And her life is starting to fall apart. They should sink to the bottom at or